Someone sent in a copy of their bank statement and they circled all the fees on it. And oh my, there's 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, that's an overdraft fee. That's gotta hurt. Hello again. I'm Mark Huffman, and this is MoneyWatch Radio. And I'm going to share a secret with you. I don't pay for my checking account. My bank pays me. Now, I'll elaborate on that later in the show, but first, we've got someone with us who knows banks, who knows fees, and who can give us some advice on how to avoid them. Brian Davis is Assistant Professor of Finance at the Smeal School of Business at Penn State, and he joins us from State College, Pennsylvania. Hey, Brian, how are you?
Good, very good, Mark. Nice to talk with you.
Okay, if you'll indulge me, I'd like to start off with a story. Years ago, I was living in suburban Washington, D.C., and a local bank invited me to take part in a focus group they were doing. And they kept asking me what decisions or what led me to choose my bank. And they said, did you choose it because it paid a high interest rate on savings? Or did you choose it because it had a low interest rate on loans? And did you choose it because it had friendly service? And I kept trying to explain to them, no, I chose it because they had a branch in my neighborhood. It was convenient. Now, it never occurred to me or anyone else in the room that the bank might one day charge for checking. That was a given, that checking was always free. Now, of course, you pay for checking. So my question to you, Brian, is whatever happened to free checking?
It's like paying for water. I never dreamed when I was growing up that bottled water would be selling for $2 a bottle, or you go to a sporting event, it's selling for $6 a bottle. Who would have thunk it? It's the same type of thing. You can't get anything for free anymore. And I think what has happened is that the competitive environment, as banks have been deregulated since the mid '80s. Some of the regulatory requirements, and just the nature of how banks are viewing their business is such that they have become really heavily dependent on fee income. And when we're talking about paying for checking, we're talking about fees. They will charge fees as long as they can get fees.
Okay, so I guess that's okay as long as the consumer knows about the fees and knows what the fees are. Are banks required to tell you about their fees? And if so, where do you find that information?
Yes, they are required to disclose them. They have to disclose whatever fees they charge in any marketing material that they put out. Once you get your statement, your statement now is about 5 pages long, and in there is all of the fee information, very similar to the credit cards. They have to be very detailed in terms of all of the fees and how they charge them and calculate those fees. The problem is that the consumer gets overwhelmed, right? You see 5 pages of mathematics, and in a lot of terms, the average consumer just doesn't understand. But you have to be vigilant, and these fees are going up, and when you look at your total return, what you're earning on putting your money somewhere, they really do cut into your paycheck, so to speak.
And I guess some fees are more important to consumers than others. I mean, I guess it depends on how you do your banking and what your needs are.
That's right. And that's where you have to go shopping, just like you do when you're taking your kids for school shopping. You go. Some Walmart has a better fee for its lunchbox versus you go to Target for the shoes and so on and so forth. And that's where banking has become. It's not just, I'll go to this bank. It's just a block from my house. You're basically, as a consumer, if those fees are worrisome to you, you have to compare convenience and at what price convenience. That's just the world that we live in, and banks are a competitive business just like any other business out there.
And there's some anecdotal evidence, and I think FDIC does a study every once in a while to see who's using banks and who isn't. And a lot of people aren't using banks anymore. Are fees the main reason?
I think, and I think that is one of the main reasons. I think a lot of it is people don't trust banks as well. I think that's cut into it, since the financial crisis. But the fees there are a major portion of this. And I used to do consulting with banks, and part of it is they were looking at profit per customer, say 10, 15 years ago. And one of the things that they started to do was say, well, there are some customers here that are just highly unprofitable. They put just a little bit of money into the bank. They write a lot of checks. A lot of times they have overdrafts. We've got to process that. And so in order to make our overall customer base more profitable, we've got to charge fees. And if that means getting those fees move those unprofitable customers out of the door, that is a positive to our bottom line, and I think that is exactly what's happening here.
Now, when you're shopping for a bank, is it possible you're going to find products the bank offers that don't have fees or have fees, but the fees are lower?
That's right. And what I would tell, the average customer, and I guess I consider myself the average customer, where I go shopping first for any banking services, is I first go to a credit union. If I can, I try to find a credit union and it's usually my first stop, but for the most part, most credit unions will not charge you, or they have programs that at least will not charge you a maintenance fee for having a bank account. Usually they're a little less, their fees are a little less on ATM charges, withdrawals. Sometimes they'll even forgive the fees that you have to pay by getting an ATM withdrawal from another bank. The loan fees are usually lower, so if you're refinancing your mortgage and so forth, closing costs are a little less in terms of those fees. And the reason that the credit unions can charge lower fees are that they don't have as much regulatory overhang as the larger banks do.
And they also don't have shareholders, correct?
That's correct. In some ways, there are mutual federal credit unions. So sometimes it's at least the way the governance is set up, it's the credit union members themselves that basically own the bank. Oftentimes they're sponsored by the so-called nonprofit organization that makes up the credit union, but they're not subject to the same vagaries of the marketplace in terms of the oversight of the market, the public stock market.
Now, some of the people who've dropped out of the banking system in recent years have migrated over to these prepaid money cards that are getting more popular. In your opinion, do you think these cards are a practical alternative if you're trying to avoid fees?
I think, again, it depends. When we're saying it's practical, I think it depends on the consumer. I think, for example, if you're a high school student earning your minimum wage job throughout the summer, and you try to hold a bank account, and they're charging you, I don't know, $15, $20 a month. That takes a bigger percentage out of your income than, say, somebody who is making $200,000 a year and can afford the $20 a month a lot easier. So I think when we're talking about lower income consumers, or the less sophisticated bank consumer, those prepaid cards fit exactly what they need. Basically, the card company is charging the fees to the retailer, as opposed to the bank charging the consumer the fees for holding that money.
Okay, so I think we have a better understanding now of why banks charge the fees that they do, and what we as consumers can do to try to pay fewer fees. Do you have any final advice for those of us who would like to pay our bank less money?
I think the main thing is, as we talked about, I think you do have to shop around, and you have to be very direct when you're talking to the bank. Go to the bank and ask very direct questions about how can I save money. Things like doing Direct deposit. Sometimes if you directly deposit your check into the bank, there won't be a maintenance fee. Sometimes if they won't charge a fee unless you write more than 10 checks a month. Ask about these things. Some fees are negotiable as well, especially if you live in a smaller town. You can kind of play one bank off of another. Look for the smaller neighborhood banks, the credit unions, rather than the banking names that you know, the bigger regional banks, because those bigger regional banks are focused on the more sophisticated consumer. They're going to try to price out that smaller customer that's not going to provide as much profit for them. Also, take a look at, are you better off holding most of your banking business, whether it's loans, transactional accounts, credit cards with one bank, or chopping it up, and that might be a way to negotiate. So you say, oh, wait a minute, I've got a loan that I want to do. I could bring that over here. Would that save me money on fees? And also look at competition, not just in terms of fees, but on interest rates, savings account rates, what's being paid there. So you have to look at it both in terms of the fee that I pay versus the interest rate that I get back.
Great advice. And just because the bank is charging fees doesn't mean you have to pay all of them if you're a savvy shopper.
That's right. I think that's the bottom line right there.
Always great advice. Brian, thanks very much.
Thanks a lot, Mark. Nice talking with you.
Brian Davis, Assistant Professor of Finance at the Smeal School of Business at Penn State University. Now, earlier I said I didn't pay for checking and that my bank pays me. Well, it's true. My bank offers something called rewards checking. It's one of the checking accounts they have. I have to meet a few requirements each month. I have to have at least one direct deposit. I have to have at least one auto payment from my account, and I have to make at least 10 debit purchases each month, and I have no trouble doing that. If I meet all these requirements, I earn a tiny bit of interest on my checking account balance, and this is the big part, I can use any ATM anywhere because my bank refunds all the service charges. So at the end of the month, my bank is giving me money, not the other way around. Chances are your bank could have something like that too, so check into it. There's no reason to pay all these fees. And we'll leave you with this. The average bank customer pays $225 a year in overdraft fees, according to a study by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And that's just overdraft fees. This is Mark Huffman, back with more about you and your money on the next MoneyWatch Radio.